this is Patrick John Mills, and he runs the art factory at Renfrew, and he's probably the greatest Canadian artist alive, in my humble opinion. And so we're just going to talk to him about art.
I'm just going to scale down a bit there and come back. I run art factory.
Yep. And this is your work behind and all around us?
Yes. And been painting for 34 years.
Okay.
And never had a plan B. Always just gave 100% to plan A, and it's here we are.
That is amazing. And I think you told me once that you were studying engineering when you just felt you met somebody who said, let's go look at art, and you felt drawn towards that. Is that correct?
My father loved me with the best that he could.
Mm-hmm.
And with the tools that he had, I kind of didn't know who I was as a young adult. So I did 2 years of civil engineering.
Yep.
And then I lived on campus at Concordia University.
Mm-hmm.
And you get thrown into this almost like a trail mix fruit basket of people.
Yep.
Of living in a dorm. And Tara Bassett, I used to go hang out in her room and watch her paint and just keep her company and chat with her. And at some point she went over and was kind enough to take me to the fine arts department and let me use her paint. And then that was kind of it.
Just experiment, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is very cool. Do you have any formal training, or you just went from there yourself and found what you needed on the road?
It's a bit of everything. So I took some art classes at Concordia University.
Yeah.
I took some art history. I finished a degree in child psychology, but I found myself painting while I was a full-time student and I had a full-time job. I was painting about 40 to 60 hours a week.
Yeah.
But then when I finished university, I started painting probably 70 to 90 hours a week. And I just thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to really jump in and apply myself so that I could get good at my skills.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to England and I worked in an art supply store. And then I worked for Michael Harding, who makes oil paint, and I worked for him 2 days a week for 2 years.
Okay.
And so kind of like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, kind of like learning with the pigments and with the paints, and really kind of being a sponge to all the interactions in those environments.
So I think you just actually answered a question that I had anyway. Which
Yes.
is, we've known each other for several years, and we've done a lot of talking about art
Yes.
off camera, and I've noticed how very deep and specific your knowledge is of pigments, of what's in a tube of oil paint or other, how they interact, everything. And I wondered, based on what I knew was a somewhat limited formal art training, how you got that knowledge. So is that where that came from?
A lot of the insight that I have is from those things, and a lot is trial and error, and a lot of it is just the more, if you go out and you eat food, you know what ham, a cheeseburger is, you know what. If someone gives you like a cheeseburger from McDonald's, or they give you one from Harvey's or one barbecued, or you get a chicken club sandwich or fish or something, we all have experience knowing food.
Yeah.
But with our eyes and the way that the more we get connoisseurs of pigments, and the more we're intimately, constantly have involvement with using them, you grow a deeper and deeper and deeper appreciation. And then you kind of like, you start reading about them, you start
Yep.
working for paint makers, you open an art supply store, you
Mhm.
start trying to explain that to customers coming into your store, the differences.
Yeah,
So you're constantly marinating your involvement with specific materials, and
Yeah.
so you just keep getting more knowledgeable, I guess, or
Yeah.
understanding of them grows deeper.
I understand that, because one of the things I've noticed in my life is when you start thinking about a direction you would like to go, sometimes the entry point or the opportunity comes before you really feel ready for it. But if you go there anyway, then you start picking up the knowledge and you start layering it and then research the next step and so on. It comes.
Yeah, the road all appears just
Yeah.
by doing.
But you have to take that step first.
Yeah, it's all about like just getting in the water. It's all
Yeah.
about like just having that involvement with those aspects of your life
Yeah,
or those materials.
yeah. I think my own journey took me some similar, some different directions.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of years in the classroom teaching teenagers about art, which was very cool, and there were times that I had to go out and learn a lot, you know, to be able
Yeah.
to teach it. But the other aspect I loved about being in the classroom is you're constantly talking about the philosophy of art. You know, why is it important? What is creativity really? Can anybody be creative or an artist? And yes, but, you know, and so part of introducing this podcast to me is an opportunity to talk to people who are immersed in art and say, you know, here, what is art, Patrick? What makes something art?
With regards to teaching and art students,
Yep.
and what you were explaining, it's nice when you see people or young teenagers or you know, they're like puppies,
Yeah,
and they're always asking the question why,
yeah,
and they're always kind of digging and scratching and doing that. And I think fundamentally it's the creativity always happens when you're always starting with the question why, and you're always exploring and trying to discover, and you keep that openness.
yeah.
So being around young kids
Mhm.
or people coming into my store, or just someone who's always like trying to search, then you always find more. Yeah.
And at the same time, the flip side to that was, so I would have sometimes the same students from grade 9 right through grade 12,
Wow.
and which was very rewarding. So grade 9, they came in because they had to take something. You
Yeah.
know, they ended up in my classroom. If they had to take one of the arts in Ontario, I'm not getting up on the stage, and I don't play an instrument, so I'll go do art. You know. So some of them were convinced they liked it when they walked in, some absolutely not. But if they came back, certainly, you know, I still had the opportunity to work with all of them, but if they came back, there was commitment there. But the hardest thing to teach was not the materials, how to draw, techniques, anything like that, because they're all learnable skills. But it was the confidence to trust themselves. So I would give them an assignment that would have, you know, different steps, but they were quite open, and you know, kids would bring their work to me partway and say, is this good, is this done, what do I need to do next? And I had to learn to turn that around and say, what do you think that needs? And they would say, maybe some green. I'm like, go do it. And to have that, by the time I saw them the second, third, fourth time in my classroom, they had developed that confidence. But it wasn't easy at the beginning. They were waiting to be told.
Yeah, I think being an artist is having, allowing yourself to give yourself permission, and I think that's also, that can happen through encouragement.
Yeah.
I would say that the hardest thing an unteachable ingredient with an artist is hunger.
Yeah.
I would say, because being an artist and going down that road, it is not so much the skill or the knowledge or this or that. It would be the hunger. Kind of like you look at someone like Mike Tyson, who was a thug and growing up in New York or somewhere, and you get that passion that will later be the necessary ingredient for you to have the persistence to continue. And that's something that's unteachable. That's something that I've noticed is, if an artist has a certain curiosity or a certain kind of need to constantly create and process the world, you cannot teach that's the extra kind of hidden spice.
The desire.
The desire.
Yeah. And I guess it's true kind of in any arena, any field you go into. If you want to get good at it, you've got to have that ongoing curiosity to seek out mentors, sources, experiments, whatever it is.
Yeah. Why does someone want to become a doctor?
Yeah.
Why does someone want to become a dentist? Why does someone want to become a painter or a poet or a musician? Or what made that person want to be a teacher? How did everything in your world align that kind of,
Yeah, very true. I think a bit of the difference compared to some of the careers you're talking about is many other careers, there's a practical aspect to them. You got a regular schedule, you get a regular paycheck, you might get a pension when you retire. There's a certain structure and security to it, whereas an artist is way out there on the entrepreneur scale, right? It's you're relying on you, and for all the opportunities out there, even I believe the gallery space is not going to give you a secure, scheduled career.
certainly not in these economic times.
Yeah.
I'm finding that even many galleries these economic times are causing a lot of reformatting, and then also socially and technological, like Facebook and Instagram and social media really enables artists to have more leverage and more, like, it's kind of the changing of the guard. So many artists have their own autonomy now to broadcast their stories that never existed before. And the kind of the social, like, I grew up and I was painting before the internet started, and before I bought like the first generation Kodak digital camera, and those were, and it only had like 1,000 like kilobytes for an image, and like I was getting all the pictures of my artwork developed from film and getting copies and sending those. So things have all kind of totally changed. But it's the economics of being an artist are a lot more entrepreneurial, and there's certainly are establishing those systems for yourself are a lot not as predictable as other careers.
Yeah. And I think you have to go back a pretty long way to find out when it was. Like, it wasn't within the last century. If you go back hundreds of years to somebody like Rembrandt or Michelangelo, they would have been trained more as craftsmen rather than artists, and then they had people who, eventually they had workshops and assistants and people who would act, who were their patrons. And so it was kind of a viable career, I think, in the way it was to be a house painter or construction or something like that. You know, it was much more task-oriented rather than creativity-oriented. Not that they weren't creative.
Rembrandt was died penniless,
Yeah,
and he went through bankruptcy and everything. And then you look at other artists like Vermeer, who had patrons, and he did only so many paintings in his lifetime, and then was discovered much after. And it's I think I can only speak to the time that I live in.
yeah,
I think now socially there's a lot of people that are artists that haven't put in their 10,000 hours, and they go out and they don't necessarily have developed, like they haven't put in their 8 years to become a PhD of knowing the skills,
yeah,
and they run out and they know how to do Instagram, they know how to do influencing and this and that, and they know how to make a lot of noise.
yeah. Again, that's probably always kind of been the case in different ways, but yeah. So that brings us around, I think, to when you look at the work that they're presenting, not just how they're presenting it, but what is art? What makes you look at one painting and say, that's a piece of art, and another and say, it's not? That's a big question, huh? It's about the biggest
Coming in
things.
light here, are we, eh, Nicolette? Yeah, what is art? I don't know. Art is that's up for anyone's.
Yeah,
You know, I think that's been stretched and stretched and stretched so far
yeah,
that at certain points and at certain lines it kind of fell off the cliff, and it's constantly, I think the definition of what is art is very elastic, and it tries to encompass and embrace everyone's kind of path, but essentially there are certain checks and balances, and there are certain measures that kind of filter out what gets more appreciation and more acknowledgement. And the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? And I think that's the more you do something, the more likely it's going to be more skilled, possibly.
I think that's true. At the same time, I would push back a little bit and say that some of the big galleries, like I'm thinking of London and England and so on, some of the big galleries, they discover somebody and promote them, and all of a sudden the demand and the prices are insane. How much of that is the caliber of the art compared to, another artist, and how much of that is the promotion?
I think that it's art is like a nefarious kind of investment in many ways.
Yeah.
And if you have certain people that Jay Joplin, or you go to different galleries, it's almost like they kind of insider trading, and if you get in early and you know what's happening, that's kind of like, that's very much another aspect of art. That's kind of a commercial investment option.
Of the piece appreciating.
Yeah.
Which is never guaranteed.
It's kind of guaranteed when you have certain people going over and saying it's really good.
That brings you back to the promotional part again, in a way.
It's certain people can really create increased supply and demand.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people honestly are blind sheep buying art.
Well, and so many people just don't have the experience of, being comfortable of looking at a piece of art and judging it for themselves. So I think they often default to somebody who presents themselves as an authority.
And that's part of the filtering process.
Yeah.
And we trust reputable art dealers who have stood the test of time, and we kind of trust their discernment. And it's hard to go over and calculate that, you know.
Yep.
But there's certain trends always work. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, when you set out to create something, a painting, a drawing, do you have a process you go through? Is there a first step for you, getting in the zone, anything?
for me, it's just there isn't really a process. There's always things always start with just being present, going over and being authentic to a certain moment in time, and then when I connect to that kind of energy, like then it you know then there's a flow that kind of transpires.
Yeah.
But it's always being kind of authentic to an impulse, or you know, but just being centered, I guess, like getting into that kind of creative, meditative kind of sense of where I need to be.
Okay. So, it'd be fair to say when you think of doing something, that's the thing you need to move towards?
Sometimes there's thinking, there's feeling, there's, you know, sometimes we paint an emotion, sometimes we think, sometimes we feel, sometimes we do neither of those, and we just simply are, and we just start.
And of course, you're starting with already having the tools at your disposal, the knowledge of how to work with your materials and so on and so forth.
There's no, I like, we painted together, and sometimes you know, there's like, there's no, sometimes it's just, you start and then something happens and then you respond and then you keep, and then it just, the orchestra inside your mind starts, you know, developing.
Yeah.
And there isn't really, how do you explain that? I think it's just by doing it over and over and over again, you start seeing a continuity and a you know, the unconscious kind of process or decisions that filter out in your creative process that you as an individual, that kind of stamps kind of like your fingerprint on your creativity. Regardless of which way it goes, there's always, like, you know, it gets more kind of articulated over years and decades.
Yeah.
In terms of a style.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree, and it changes over time, obviously. If you kept doing the same thing all the time, it wouldn't be authentic, right?
Well, it'd be a very successful commercial artist.
Yeah, but then again, we're coming around to that definition of what is art, you know, and I've used the analogy with people, you know, if you look at poetry versus rhyming, a lot of good poems rhyme, have a rhyming scheme. Pretty much everybody can rhyme stuff, but creating a bunch of words or lines that rhyme doesn't make them poetry.
Yeah.
It's the magic, it's the spark, it's that aha something that makes them poetry, right? Saying the right, I don't know.
Yeah, it's that inspiration that kind of washes your soul in a moment, that kind of rains through you, and at each period or chapter of your life, certain things happen, like when you're young and confident, or when you're older and wiser, or you know, or whatever. Everything constantly keeps evolving and changing in specific moments, and you know, I think I could probably rhyme better now as a poet, but I think the urgency of how I felt and what I was like a puppy, and I was so enthusiastic and vulnerable and open to life in my 20s versus now, like everything kind of like certain sparks and certain flames shine or are magnified or whatever in different capacities all the time, depending on where you are and what you're doing. So that's yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. And the interesting thing again about art, we were talking about how the artist is really has to be a self-driven entrepreneur. There's no stable career path. And so I just related to that. I feel like a lot of people might say, oh, so you go look at your canvas or paper and you just throw some blue on, and then whatever you are inspired to do next, they see that as very artsy fartsy and maybe not real art, you know? But I'd say it's the opposite. It's that is how you are really creating original art. Not by, again, anybody can learn techniques. I guarantee you, I taught them for many years, right? I can teach anybody how to do a realistically shaded portrait. I can teach anybody to draw a city in 2-point perspective, and a lot of those things, the realism, the structured stuff, anybody out there who really wants to can learn that.
It's a bit like math, you know?
Yeah.
You can add, subtract, multiply, divide, then you can go to like calculus and do derivatives, or you can go into matrix. It's all trainable like skills of just comprehension of certain kind of cognitive abilities.
But then you've got the mathematicians who are trying to discover something new about how the universe works and using numbers to get there. So I would guess that's where the real creativity comes in, because they can't rely on the same old formulas to get to somewhere new.
Yeah, that would be, that's, certainly would be, you know, how do you invent, how do you discover, how do you make those kind of things, and, you know, everyone has a ceiling and some people don't have walls.
Yeah.
You know? It's all relative to, you know, it's, I think in math or something, having been in engineering, and Nasser Saad, who was head of the math department at the time, and who, someone I cherish and love, has given himself to, you know, mathematics and things, and and I always wanted to go like x equals y times or plus God. I said, where's the truth? And we would debate, like, you know, putting God and into a mathematical equation. You know, there's always a bridge of faith and love in everything that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe that creating art is an act of love. And I don't think you can do it unless you feel like you have something to offer the world.
That's, if you want to offer something to the world, it's tough because you do things, I find, there's the entrepreneurial kind of wanting to always invent or always like evolve or grow or like develop, and you're always kind of self-pioneering your own, you're kind of like dancing in the dark of your own creativity, hoping to kind of unveil new revelations of perception and truth within inside yourself. And that's very much an artistic journey, not necessarily a creative economic path to stability and certainty. They're kind of diametrically opposed to each other, unless you have people that really are authentically appreciating what you do,
Yeah.
and kind of want to appreciate that in a much deeper capacity. That's something, and also authentically, like they seek something that you are communicating, and how you're communicating it is also another language that speaks to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's interesting balance, and yeah, always try to be authentically yourself. Whenever I would just say, every time that you're an artist, just try to authentically be yourself, and if you have an impulse, explore it,
Mm-hmm.
and just like move through it.
Yeah. Outstanding. Well, thank you very much, Patrick. Hope you'll talk to me again another time.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. Live, love, art.
Live, Love, Art, Art Factory, 11 Bridge Street, Renfrew.
There you go. Too good to be true.
That was good. That was fun.
Well,